Let's begin. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here today. It's one of the Seoul coaches meetup, like Maulik has named it as an academy. I was really happy to see the word academy. And so, in any event, it's such a wonderful timing that we have picked the topic today, and the timing is perfect because Roger is back from all the total cheerfulness, that he got from nature. And so the whole idea here is that, as coaches, do we, how much of self empowerment can we use? What do we need? And what's the requirement from the beginning till the end or through the coaching process, or what happens and how do we do that? So is it required? And so all these questions are there. So Roger, over to you.
Yeah, so I'd like to just start by saying that this is a really interesting and important question, because it's so easy to have an idea, and it's so easy to have an aspiration. Then we have to go to, can we actually fulfill on that idea and fulfill on that aspiration? And of course, that's what coaching is all about, is to support the people who are being coached, whether that's as a single individual or as a part of a group, to use the special features of the coaching process to support them in reaching for something that they may have thought that they wanted to do for even a really long time. And so one of the great coaching questions is, can you comment on how it is that you've got this aspiration or this goal or this intention that you have, but that you have not fulfilled? And what do you think are some of the reasons for that? And of course, people will say all kinds of things. And it's interesting, one of the things that gets revealed to a person who's being coached is how often they answer questions about themselves in the way that they wish they were, as opposed to in the way that they actually are. And so when you ask a person, what are some of the things you come to mind for you when you think about why you haven't fulfilled this goal that you want to fulfill? And remember, the question is about empowerment for coaches. So I'm basically just using the opportunity to speak to both coaches and coach clients, because after all, who's the best client of a coach? And that is themselves. Can they use the coaching process that they propose as useful for other people on themselves? So when we get to that point, when we ask that question about unfulfilled aspirations, what are some of the complexities or barriers or challenges that you've experienced? And if the person is really honest with themselves, they'll say, if they're coaching themselves, or they'll say to their coach, I'm not brave enough, or I thought I could have this idea and then have a coach, and then that would marvelously make it possible for me to do this thing that I've never done before. And so it's really the nexus of where coaching happens. And so that's kind of like for the coaching client. But what about for the coach themselves? It's easy to say, I want to be a coach. It's even easy to go to a coach training. And it's not that hard to get certified as a coach by pulling together a few people and going through the steps. And one of the great powerful things about the Circle of Life is that the Circle of Life coaching methodology has a very distinct set of steps, so that the coach doesn't have to remember what those steps are. It's just like, use the blueprint for success. It's all there. And so now finally, Colin, going to your question, which is how much self-empowerment is needed for a coach to be successful? And the answer is, sorry, a lot. And some people, and this is just now from experience of training coaches for decades, some people like the idea of becoming a coach, but are not courageous enough in the end to actually use the tools. And there's a lot of reasons for that. People aren't naturally uncourageous. People are not just naturally uncourageous. They are usually, shall we say, molded into an uncourageous person by circumstances. And that's usually by people who really didn't know that much about what they were talking about, telling that individual that they weren't good enough in ways that were either overt, like you're not good enough, or in subtle ways that left the feeling that you're not good enough, you're not worthy, you're not strong, you're not smart. And so I think that the bottom line answer to your question, Colin, is that there's a lot of self-empowerment required. And there's not a lot of people who can empower themselves just by going to a coaching program, although many do. And we have the experience of many of the coaches that we've trained who have really, kind of grabbed themselves and pulled themselves forward, knowing that the benefit was going to be huge. And it's one of the reasons why we're getting together here with some of our coaches on an occasional basis, because we want to support people in realizing their dreams. And if the dream is to become a coach, which is such a beautiful aspiration, the world right now, in this world, almost everybody in the world needs a new life plan, a refreshed, rethought, reinvestigated life plan. And so the human race needs millions of coaches. And so for those coaches that we've trained who have not by circumstances, of course, there's all kinds of things that actually overwhelm personal empowerment. So you may be totally empowered, you may be totally disciplined, you may be totally committed, and then the circumstances of life come along. Somebody gets sick, somebody dies, somebody needs something that you have, and you have to stop everything that you were doing to be able to fulfill for whatever those circumstances are. So in every case, what we're trying to do at the Circle of Life Coach Institute is create opportunities for people who have studied to be a coach to actually then get some coaching. And even just listening to the answers to these questions, this dialogue that I've been having with Colin and others who show up to these events, all of that is intended to support coach trainees in becoming certified coaches who then become actualized coaches in the world and fulfilling this need for millions of coaches that we have. So, Colin, to you, what are your thoughts about this? And then we can, I'm really interested in hearing from Mike Brown, because he's a person who's been very involved with populations of people who are in troubling situations. But to you, Colin, what are your thoughts beyond what I've already been speaking?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned a few things here, and there's an inspiration that a coach get when the coach gets trained or gets into becoming a coach, is wants to help people. That's one of the initial startup point that most of the people say, well, gee, this is something I like to help people. So there's a compassion that comes up first, and then there is a curiosity that we talk about. Then there are tools that we provide. The courage part that you mentioned is very fascinating because many times are they equip themselves to handle these nuances of whenever when an interface comes with the coach and the client, how well are they able to handle? We mentioned a little bit about last few conversations. Rhonda was there, and we mentioned something about being an empath. For example, getting involved into the field out there with somebody, and then how can it drain your energy? Can that happen? So that's another area. I'm just going to mention some areas rather than discuss them. So you see that's one area. Then the another interesting angle that comes up is the fact that, you know, most of the coaching programs, like you alluded to, you know, they give tools, they give the, you know, beautiful, you know, like outline of what is to be done and steps and all that. So most of the programs do that. And that outline is okay. But they don't have built-in process of practicing something that stabilizes them along with the client and maintain that whole environment, coaching environment, to be sacred. And to me, out of all the things that we're talking about here, I think the process that we have built in with Circle of Life is just amazing if it's used, you know, in the way it's intended to be. And I for one came in that way, and I have to tell you, it is just something very fascinating to me because every time I turn around, I think that it's great to to be inspired and have the tools and to use them, and then the whole energy level sinks down because something doesn't go right with the client, or like you said, personally also personal life can hit them and all that can happen. Personally is okay, but let's say person is fine, coach is fine, but then taking part in the whole process that is not going right in the right direction and all that stuff, that can have the energy shifts, significant energy shift for the coach himself or herself. And that is when that center circle that you've created is so powerful to be used. So yes, in reality, it is needed, and I have want to use that, you know, extensively. On the other side of the coin, if we flip side of the coin is also interesting. You may be having so much of, you know, ability to do the empowerment and everything else, and then you don't have the roadmap to go further beyond that. And you know that is needed by the coach, who is extremely high in energy field and everything like that, but does not have an idea about how to go step at a time to help someone else. Now they can go up there very nicely with their practices. That's no problem. Or, you know, but how do you lead somebody in a practical way to provide that particular roadmap for them? So I'm going to end there, open up more questions than answers. And Mike.
Well, before we go to Mike, let me just be sure that everybody understands that what you were talking about on the one side of the coin was personal self-care for the coach. In other words, using care, not just, you know, hydration and rest, those are all very important, but also talking to oneself and using what we call it, self-nourishing, to be able to have a part of ourself, at least a part of ourself, be able to give testimony to the fact that there's courage in here somewhere, or that there's energy in here somewhere. And that if we use our meditation skills, our yoga, Tai Chi, etc., you know, all of those. And then when we do self-care relative to the 12 aspects of the Circle of Life, like self-care under nourishment, what does that mean? Well, good food choices. Self-care under stress, what does that mean? It means having stress management procedures. What does it mean, self-care under finances? Well, it means to be alert and attentive and paying attention and not being in denial or shall we say sidestepping because, oh, I don't feel comfortable with that. But to bring ourselves front and center, that really becomes almost like the word discipline, which, you know, a lot of people are not very happy with having to be disciplined in their lives. And then when you talk about the other side, the step by step, you know, thank you for reminding us, because one of the things that a coach might say is that I just don't feel like I know enough. And the circle of life is built so that you don't have to know anything. You don't have to, like you've said a couple of times, Kalind, which I really appreciate, is that you don't have to be talented to be a coach. You just need to have empathy and a desire to be a part of how the world is a better place, and then simply use the coaching system.
Right. One thing I want to continue that last sentence of yours to say that a belief in the system of the process, it starts with the belief that this will work. And then you use it to say, okay, yes, it's working. And that gives you more empowerment to say, yeah, you know what? If I follow the process, the way it's written out, everything else, it starts with the belief. So a lot of time the belief is also not that strong when you start out. So anyway, that's just the point that I want.
So, Michael Brown, what do you think? What have you learned in your illustrious career and since your retirement to a Native American community? What an interesting experience that has got to be. And then this whole idea of self-empowerment, and then reflecting on back in the day when you were working for, what's the name of that organization?
Mayo.
Mayo Clinic. You know, and
Um,
communicating with all those families. And then now when you're in this circumstance where you're actually working with, or living in the neighborhood with, you know, a subculture, originally the dominant culture in this continent. What can you say about the whole concept of empowerment, the necessity for empowerment, and how to be able to kind of phase one's way into it? Back to you.
yeah, the necessity of empowerment. It's not enough. I'll say that. It's not enough to empower. It's too abstract in my experience. So, what I'm experiencing right now, in fact, is, you know, you started off with this, we have an idea to make some change or improvement or do something. My idea of myself that being a coach fits into is that I'm the kind of person who really wants to help alleviate suffering and help other people through their difficulties and through whatever's going on in their lives. Um, and it's a very real idea. Um, I also know that my realization that I've come to is that I also have a very apparently very real and very multi-layered and often very urgent and pressing self-defense mechanism, so that when things don't go my way, I um, I get angry and cynical and engage in self-justification.
Mm,
Um,
wow.
so you know, to protect perceived or sometimes real, perhaps, threats to self identity, to ego, and so forth. So, you know, I get caught in this being either being the savior or the victim and the martyr. And I've kind of struggled with that all through my career as a counselor and chaplain and so forth. But I was somewhat able to insulate myself a little bit, probably because I was within an institution that kind of did that and helped protect that. But living here, I've had the experience just recently of wanting to become a substitute teacher and go in and work with kids periodically, maybe once a week or something like that. And what I have found as I've been into the schools is kind of horrifying, and it makes me realize that um, for many people that I'm currently living with and working with, a lot of empowerment tools have been given to them. If you think of federal government spending money for technology in the schools or for this or that. Lots of ways have been used to try to empower. But what seems to be sometimes missing is the fact that people are expected to succeed in a system which has been created, which makes it almost impossible for them to succeed. And so, no matter what you throw at them in terms of empowerment, if they're not quite able to really sort through it and figure out what really does work for them and what doesn't, then it's just more confusion out there. It's just noise. And a lot of the kids that I've experienced that it really upsets me a great deal is that, they're surrounded in a system and they're surrounded by circumstances which almost which make it even difficult for them to figure out how to use the resources or empowerment that might be available to them. And then that gets me very upset and very angry. And so I slip into all that other stuff. And so that brings me back to understanding myself a little bit better and trying to understand a little better about, or be honest about the fact that, yeah, I really do want to help people, but now I have to have the courage to realize that it's not always going to happen in the way that I expect it. And things might not go my way, and I'm going to fail, and I'm going to be attacked, my sense of identity or ego, all these things are going to happen. And that really deep down inside, there's a real piece of me which is a coward. There's a part of me that's scared, and scared to really engage the pain of the world or other people. And that could be as a teacher, it could be teaching Tai Chi, it could be coaching, it could be in all kinds of sort of social interactions. And I need to acknowledge that part of me, which is basically vulnerable and scared and doesn't really have an effing clue what to do about it. And yet still then allow myself to be vulnerable and to be present and to be involved and to continue conversations, but be very realistic about what it is that I'm offering. And what I'm offering is my own vulnerability, and then what little I might know, what little I've experienced. But I'm just offering a fellow person on this journey, but one who admittedly has had all kinds of blessings in his life that other people haven't had. And how do I allow that goodness to flow through me to other people without setting up some sort of an agenda that I've got really answers, or that I really even have that much courage. In fact, I don't have much courage compared to what I see around here, our people that survive in a system which has been painfully neglecting of them. So I think being a coach, just to circle back around to this question of empowerment, how do I empower myself to be honest about what I'm doing and what I want to do, so that I don't trick myself into thinking, well, I'm going to be this coach and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that with people, and find out that I've built up a house of cards that could easily, when one card comes loose, it all comes crashing down. So I'm trying to say that I am working on understanding what empowerment means for me, but also what it means for me to have courage and honesty about how I feel, and then be able to stick it out with people when things go really bad, and when life is tough, and when things don't go the way I would want them to go, or when I feel like I'm a failure, or I feel like I haven't done a good enough job, and so on and so forth. So the whole theme of empowering and courage and honesty about my own, about who and what I am and my motivations, and how easy it is for me to be crushed, and then what to do with that. Where do I take that vulnerable crushed side? So I think for someone like me, being coached would mean being able to be honest about, okay, here's where I feel like I'm just completely inadequate and lost, and then look for strategies or look for ways just to stay with that and allow that to heal or allow that to move into some other phase. And
Yep.
it's only, I think, in that way that I can really be, I think, available to people and really listen to them, and without dumping, which I didn't think I was doing, but I am still doing it, dumping a lot of my own stuff in the mix.
Wow. Wow. That's just everything that you said is so incredibly poignant. And, so you can be a person who appears or seems to, or even should be, uh, you know, we'll just use the word courageous and naturally empowered. And of course, we probably all have some kind of a feeling about how God made us in such a way that we would be naturally courageous and empowered. And then yet have the experience for all the reasons that could be, and there's surely long lists in everybody's lives, including yours and mine and everybody on the call now and everybody in the world. So you said bring your vulnerability to the coaching process. I think that is so powerful, because the average person who would be in a coaching context is clearly vulnerable, because they're putting themselves into a situation where the bottom line is that there's something left undone that they haven't been able to do. And so now they're reaching for help for that. And they're not thinking of it as doctor help or dentist help. They're thinking of it as sort of having someone to listen and guide, which coaches have. And, we say all the time, how much do the students love it when the teacher's wrong? Of course, we always love it when the teacher's right, because then we know that the teacher's really bona fide teacher. But then when the teacher's wrong, there's something thrilling about that. And so when you say, I could bring my vulnerability to the coaching process and have that be actually a kind of power.
Mhm.
I like that. I like that a lot. And I think that the average individual doesn't want to have a coach up here and themselves down here feeling like they should be expecting to be told what to do. But how can the coach raise that person up? Well, one of the ways to do it is to lower the coach down. And you have like a natural access to that. You've spoken eloquently about how you already kind of put yourself down there. So now can you move down there, be overt about your own vulnerability, and then still be able to lead the process. It's almost like a peer-oriented process, which really the circle of life is, because we're never really saying, I know the answer to your question, so here's what you should do. What we're saying is, I know a process that seems very powerful, and I will be with you while you use it.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts coming back on all of that?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it informs the actual relationship and the power dynamic. It also helps me to realize, hey, when I'm in the midst of honest with myself and all that messiness, it sucks and it's painful. And so that's where somebody else could be too. So to be very compassionate about that and be willing to listen to that. And it's also, prevented me. I can make a lot of excuses, COVID, and there's this and there's that, which is all true. But, why haven't I moved quicker on getting certified and becoming a coach? And I'll have to be honest with you. It's in addition to some of those other factors and, and so forth. But it's also because, I'm basically kind of scared, and I'm perfectly honest about it. I'm putting myself out there saying, oh, yeah, I'm somebody that can help you walk you through things that you haven't been able to solve yet. But together, and you still do have the solutions, and together we'll do that. But kind of to put myself out there, particularly in this environment where I'm an outsider, people are very hard. It's very hard to build relationships of trust and so forth among the folks I'm living around. And rather than do all that hard work, it's just been easier to sit back and think about it and talk about it. And
Yeah.
that's been a hell of a lot easier than actually doing it. And
Yeah,
I'm
well, you're playing some music at the same time.
sorry.
Are you taking refuge in your music?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. I take refuge wherever I can find it. I've created my own little inner enclosure, to use monastic kind of language. I can sit in that enclosure and feel like, oh, I'm really together and I feel very spiritual and everything, and I got a hand on this and I'm ready to engage the world. But then when push comes to shove and I'm out there engaging that world and that world's pushing back with all of the stuff that it has,
Yeah.
makes me want to run back to my enclosure.
Well, I gotta give it to you, Mike. I think that how many coaches would love to be in the situation that you're in, at the transparency that you carry, the honesty with yourself that you carry, the vulnerability that you carry. It's extremely powerful assets that actually you have. These are assets. These are not negatives in reality, because this is something that is needed most in the coach, and you have it. Now, as to the situation out there, you also mentioned a little bit about the system and what you're facing out there. Well, it's not something that, it's not you then. It's an outside stuff. It's just this is there, you're in that situation. But what you're carrying, what Roger said is fantastic, is that you are carrying the equal, you know, emotions with the people that you're facing. You're not putting yourself as a little high like that, like what Roger said, and that's amazing. That is actually required in a coach, and I think you have it. This is what you're expressing is just amazing. It is really powerful. I wish I wish everybody would have what you have. All the coaches would have, because I mean it's more difficult to get to that level than it's easy to say, well, I know this and I have this process and I can do this, and it becomes a little bit artificial.
Hmm.
It's an artificial pumping up happens, and then all of a sudden things come down. So I applaud you for what you just said. All of the
A lot
stuff.
of authenticity present.
A
So
lot of sensitivity. Yeah.
would like to hear from Terry, but before we go to Terry, Mike, back to you. One of the things that just pops into my mind, and this isn't intended as a solution, it's just intended as a reflection of reality, and that is that previous to living on the Navajo reservation as the spouse of the physician who works in the local clinic, which definitely in a local sense puts you in a very strange dynamic, and one that is, you know, just inherently difficult to navigate as a sort of a alien player. But I think about your former work as a chaplain for the Mayo Clinic, and I just wonder, why we don't like to ask why much as coaches. So I'm just putting this out as something that I'm wondering, and I'm not expecting. In fact, we should go on and just have you consider this on your own, and you can send me an email and tell me your thoughts. But the gravity of your, or the magnitude of your credibility from the work that you have done as a chaplain with a huge medical organization. No matter what you were doing, you might have been sitting in a file drawer, checking boxes and signing off on paper. But we know that you're trained as a chaplain. We know what chaplains know how to do, and at least to some extent, you must have ever done that. And so I'm curious as to, and you can ask this question to yourself and ruminate on it, why you've decided that it's important to crack the nut the local sociological circumstance to prove to yourself that you're a great coach, when there are so many people out in the world who would say to themselves, oh my gosh, this guy's a chaplain for the Mayo Clinic, he's got to be a fantastic coach. And no, that probably wouldn't be something that would fly as among your Navajo neighbors, but we're on Zoom now, and I'm on Zoom calls all the time where there are people from Russia and South Africa and Asia. So, chew on that and let me know what your thoughts are. And then Terry, just for, hope you don't mind, we'll put you on the spot just a little bit.
Right.
What do you think about this whole concept of what magnitude of empowerment is required of someone to be a coach or become a coach? And you've had some of your own circumstances that have probably pulled you off the path. And so what can you say about actually what was required to get yourself back onto the track to finishing your certification?
I love what Michael said about bringing our vulnerabilities to our coaching practice and about courage and how important it is to bring the courage we have manifest in other aspects of our life to our coaching practice in order to move forward. As I listened to what was being said and to what you just said now, Roger, I had been thinking in terms of the fact that I had been pulled off track. But what I'm realizing is I haven't been pulled off track or a detour. The past 2 years has been part of my training process. When I stopped with the Circle of Life coaching training, what had happened was I actually did lose my voice. I lost the ability to talk. And I went through a whole journey of medical processes and what have you. And part of my doctoral studies is on resilience, and I didn't expect that I would be doing an experiential part of study in resilience training. But that's where I'm really at now, is that it's time to take everything that I've learned about resilience, about courage, about moving forward in life, when circumstances are completely overwhelming, and taking that into a coaching practice where I'm sharing the vulnerabilities, journeying with someone through a coaching process. It's been a never-ending story as far as learning about courage and getting up and moving forward. I'm expecting to have some back surgery next week, so that's another aspect of learning about being vulnerable in the process. And I'm a nurse, so it's very hard to be the patient. And so, but it's taught me about the experience of being vulnerable in overwhelming circumstances. So I see all of that as having prepared and laid the path for me moving forward with a coaching practice. My back injury has sort of forced me now into moving beyond nursing and taking that whole nursing experience and process with me into a coaching practice. So my body is sort of saying, okay, you've been waiting too long. Now's the time to do it. So it's a matter of listening internally and having that courage to step out in the process and do the coaching.
Nice. And I think you said that you've got a couple of people who are lined up to be your clients and so forth.
Yes, yeah. One person has had a lot of health issues, and the other person is a vet who's dealing with a lot of issues post-service. So
Wow,
there'll be individual coaching. It won't be a group process for them, But yeah, I'm very excited about moving forward with it.
And do you feel pretty comfortable with using the Blueprint for Success and all of that as a backdrop framework for your coaching sessions?
I do. I have to get access to the material again, but my master's actually was in coaching. I
Hmm.
went to Maryland University of Integrative Health. So I have that certification and that training. And what I loved about the Circle of Life was it gave such a beautiful blueprint to move forward with a client, working through the whole circle of life, um, and helping them move forward in their life.
Nice, 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 nice. Well, thank you so much. And Colin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think she really expressed the whole scenario about how she's faced the challenges and how she's actually extracting the coaching process to move forward, and that's really wonderful. And taking the vulnerability in hand, and she's actually experiencing some more challenges coming up with back surgery. So I really appreciate what how she's handling it at this point as we are going through this. I mean, next week she's gonna have surgery. So, and yeah, we will. I've again checked with Maulik, and I'm gonna make sure that we get the stuff to you. Okay,
Hmm.
make sure
Okay,
that
great. Thank you.
we provide the support for that, because you already have two people already, so it would be done very soon.
So, Rhonda has been faithful as an attendee these meetings, and she's put herself out there a few times. Rhonda, would you rather just sit this one out, or do you want to let us know what you're thinking as we're having this discussion?
No, I had, if I could just add a couple of things.
Please.
In listening to Michael, um, it seems like that vulnerability or that thing in yourself that maybe questions your ability to coach because you haven't attained where you thought you should be could just be tossed out the window because it's an extra pressure. Not that you don't do like self-care and, get at the root of things that are bothering you, but just use it to propel. And I'm talking to myself to use it to propel your ability to understand people that feel like they can't progress because you've run into it in yourself. And like I said, I'm speaking to me too. And today at noon, Roger, that meeting that I had that I couldn't meet you at noon, one of the women is that I meet with it's a little informal mastermind group, and she's a coach, and she said, "How can I be a coach if my home life is so imperfect?" She has trouble with her teenage son. It's just I'm crazy. Everything is crazy at home. How can I be a coach? Who's going to hire me? But that's just like an ampersand. That's an and she's trained as a coach, and she has the heart for it. It's just, and so it's like a vulnerability in her. She feels like, oh, I can't do this because my home life isn't perfect. Well, we aren't called to be perfect, in my opinion. So with regard to the thing that you said about self-care, I have to do self-care every day. Otherwise, you don't want to know me. So that's like Qigong and walking and hula a couple of times a week. So that kind of helps to, keep me in the body, like rather than up in my head, like, oh, this is because there's been a lot of horrific things that have happened the last year and several months. I mean, and everybody has had their own variation of that. So it's like self-care and then just trying to keep loving myself even when I'm unlovable.
That's a really great one. Thanks. That's a great exclamation point on your declarations there, Rhonda. Thank you.
And then another thing that I've been working on with my coach, and we had a good laugh about it this morning, was I said that I was working on learning to be unoffendable. Oh, I got such a long way to go. Unoffendable, that's a good one. So, if you see me struggling, I'm struggling with being unoffendable.
Let's make that, how about, could we go to fiercely
fiercely unoffendable,
unoffendable.
but still not being a doormat too. So it's just like there's like this whole balance. So anyway,
Not
that's all.
format, but also not becoming defensive, right?
Yeah, I mean it's a lifetime. I heard Michael say some of that stuff like justify, and I'm not picking on Michael. It's like, yeah, it's like I can justify my own position day and night, and my own what little cone of silence that I don't want to leave too. So
I had this
anyway.
impression about being unoffendable because it's not something where you fight back or you argue. It's just being stable and steady and unoffendable. Sounds like a really cool thing to cultivate.
Well, it's like Tai Chi, it's like you push hands. If you're pushing too hard, it's like you don't want to push too hard, but you don't want to get pushed too hard either.
Right. Well, let's turn it back to Kalind,
Thank you.
our master leader here. What are you thinking, Kalind?
Well, I'm just basically saying that I think this has been a very rich, exchange about how the empowerment can be used by the coaches, and I go back to the whole idea that whenever I find that I have external obstacles or things are really out very difficult, I have been helped with the process itself. I turn back into phase one. Like we have the phase one for coaching, self coaching, helping with ourselves. I go back to that because I'm not ready for phase two. I'm not able to help somebody else. That's fine. But how about helping myself at that point? And so I turn back into that whole process. And time and again, when I draw my circle again, one of the biggest magic thing, Roger, I've shared that with you and almost everybody now. The most magic thing for me is to draw the circle again. As soon as I draw the circle, and I draw circle like 3 or 4 times a day sometimes, because it changes. Things change and something happened, and let me see what happened now. And that has given me so much of awareness of the present moment. It does. And yeah, there are times when I don't know I have the equipment to handle it, and I may not be, at patience. Many times I lose patience. It's just like Mike said, anger and patience, loss of patience, and these things happen because the expectations are high. And if I sometimes ask myself, did I put my expectations a little high? Can I break it down into smaller steps, like the process has said? Can I think about the next step to saying hello to somebody? I have to go down to the smallest possible step, and then I realize in myself that because I am looking at myself, that itself is good. Self-reflection, the ability to reflect is a huge plus for the coach. That's all I'm going to say, because I really appreciate the sensitivity that all three of you carry, and Roger, of course, is a master. He pointed out a few stuff that I've learned significantly today, but that awareness itself, self-awareness is huge.
Self-awareness is huge.
Yeah, it's
Well,
huge.
we know that next week, and even for a couple of weeks, I'm not sure, Colin, maybe you would say, Rebecca is going to be doing some things, some sessions or a session on
Marketing.
I'm not even sure.
It's marketing, I think, but I need to confirm the dates with her. I've not been able to do that since you got back, so I'll need to really revisit those dates that she had originally sent it to us, Maulik and me both. So
Okay.
I'll do that, and I'll announce that. But I think there are 3 marketing sessions that she lined up during May.
Very good.
So I'm excited about that. I think it's going to be good.
All right. Well, thank you for supporting us and getting together today.
Thank you, everyone. I think it's been just wonderful to share, and I hope you got something out of it. And please reach out. And again, Mike, one thing I do have to say: that certification is just a piece of paper. You're way beyond that already. the way you're approaching things. I mean, Terry the same way. And I recognize that we all need that paper at some point and all that, but it's still a piece of paper. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Thank
All right. Most welcome.
Thank
But
you,
I'll help
everybody.
you.
Wish you well.
you, everybody. Bye-bye.